So one of the best ways to think about podcast trailers is almost like a handshake. It's a first impression of sorts, a way to introduce yourself to potential listeners. And if you do the job well enough, people will start listening and they might even subscribe. It's not particularly hard to make one, but it can be quite challenging to make a good one. So in today's video, we're going to tell you everything you might need to consider when making a trailer, and we'll give you a few examples as well. This video was initially written by Yvonne over on the MatchMaker blog. Go ahead and check it out in the description.
Are you looking for a podcast or radio show to appear on? Are you struggling to find a guest for your podcast or radio show? Let me introduce you to MatchMaker.fm. Simply create a profile, narrow your niche, and use the inbuilt messenger to contact potential partners. And the best part, it's free to sign up. So, let's find your match.
So just in case you've been living in like a nuclear bunker for the past 15 years or something, what is a podcast trailer? So it's a short clip that could be either audio or video, basically serving as an elevator pitch for your podcast. The idea is to entice a listener enough to eventually go and watch a full episode. So you could have clips from already recorded shows, or maybe just detailing what your show is about. There's a few places you can find these trailers, such as at the very, very top of your podcast feed, wherever you may find your podcasts. And there's also the opportunity to put them on your social media, your YouTube. You could even pay for a slot on another person's podcast to advertise your own. Yes, people do allow that. People will allow you to advertise your podcast on theirs. That is a thing. Now, you might be wondering, do I need a podcast trailer? Well, no, not really, not necessarily, but would we encourage it? Absolutely. Another great way to think about it is if you were starting up your own business or you're going freelance, you'd probably want a business card. The same sort of goes with podcast trailers. You don't need one per se. It's kind of just a nice bonus, but having one will definitely benefit you in the long run. And like I say, having one gives your podcast a presence on directories like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and wherever other people might find their podcast. So just gets your name out there. It gives people very quick and easy ways of discovering you. So no, you don't need one, but get one. So good for the answers, yes, because otherwise that would be the end of the video. And I've still got a bit to say. But how long should your podcast trailer be? Well, think Goldilocks. Not too long, not too short. There's a nice little middle spot where you can eat your porridge. Is that what she did? She eat porridge? Was Goldilocks just a thief? So what I mean by this is 30 seconds minimum, 2 minutes maximum, and then there's a sweet spot of about a minute in between. The reason for this is you don't want it to be too long because then it just becomes a podcast episode in itself. And you don't want it to be too short because that's probably not enough time to give a listener an idea of what your podcast is about and the tone and everything else they might be looking for. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up everything you need to know about a podcast trailer before going in. So what should you do when you're actually creating a podcast trailer? Well, we've narrowed it down into 6 questions you should probably ask yourself before getting started. Number 1, who are you? Wait, no, that's more like, who are you? Who are you? So you might already be aware if you started your podcast, but having a good host-to-listener relationship is something that is essential. So telling the listener a little bit about yourself before they even get started in listening is a great start to building this relationship. And by that, I don't mean you have to like write them letters every month, telling them where you've been and what's happened to your pet frog. But I basically just mean that it's nice for them to get to know a bit about you before they dedicate to really getting to know you. However, don't go too far. Don't say too much. Don't tell them everything about your pet frog straight away because you want to say something for the actual podcast. So instead of giving them facts, why not give them questions? Why not give them a little tease of what to expect? A little cliffhanger maybe. Especially if your podcast is narrative-based, you don't want to give them everything that happens straight away. Obviously, that would be a terrible idea. That'd be like watching a film trailer where they tell you exactly what happens at the end. No one wants that. So just tell them a little bit about yourself, give them a few enticing little questions, move on. Number 2, who is your target audience? So once you've built this relationship, it's important to talk to your audience directly. And a podcast trailer is obviously the best way to do that. Take some time, if you haven't already, to figure out your target audience, write it down, and then use that when you're making your trailer. Because providing a relatable statement for your target audience is one of the best ways to hook them in right at the start of your trailer. Like you could directly call them out. You could be like, frog fans. And they're like, oh, I like frogs. Or you could be a bit more low key and be like, do you like croaking, ribbiting, and hopping about? Then this is for you. I don't know why I'm on frogs today. Anyway, do this right at the start of your trailer and it will ensure that they listen for the full trailer and then hopefully go and listen to your podcast as well. Number 3, what's it about? So you want to be as clear as possible in your trailer. There's no need to be mysterious here. Because although I said questions and cliffhangers might be good, if people don't know what those questions and cliffhangers are actually about, then you've lost them. So this is why you should make sure that your podcast genre is clear from the offset. For example, if you're a comedy podcast, then you want to make clear ways that people will be entertained through your podcast. The goal is obviously to spark interest here, but you also want to manage people's expectations. If people go in expecting this hilarious live comedy show every week, only to find that you only do that every so often, and most of the time it's just you in your bedroom making a few jokes, they might not carry on. Number 4, why should they listen? So there is a lot of podcasts out there. A lot. Thousands. Millions, in fact. So by creating a podcast trailer, you are essentially giving a pitch on why people should dedicate their time to your podcast and not someone else's. So you need to make it very clear how your podcast stands out from the crowd. Why should they listen? What are you going to give them from listening? So why not offer an insight into your podcast? Why not give a clip from an already recorded podcast? Something where people can definitely go, oh yeah, that sounds good. If you haven't recorded anything yet, then why not record something specifically for the trailer? So again, going back to the comedy podcast, people need to know that you're funny. So why not do a little funny skit? Why not record something with your co-host that's funny? As long as you're saying what you offer that other podcasts aren't, then you're on to a winner. Number 5. When will new episodes be released? So this one's pretty easy. You just need to make sure you state how often you'll be releasing podcasts and the kind of schedule that people can expect in your trailer. If you don't have a schedule yet, then I'd get one. Listeners like consistency. They're creatures of habit. They like to know when their next episode is coming out. I don't know about you, but my favorite podcast release schedule sort of works its way into my routines. I know exactly what's going to come out on a Monday, what's going to come out on a Friday, and I sort of base my days around them if I want to listen to them. If you can't have a schedule because your episodes are a bit more sporadic for whatever reason, then explain this too. Explain why they're sporadic and make it clear that even though they are sporadic, you're going to be getting great content possibly more frequently than if you had a release schedule. And if you're maybe just testing the waters with a podcast and not really dedicated to a full weekly lineup yet, make this clear as well. You can always change your trailer at a later date. Number 6, where can people find it? So the chances are people will be listening to your podcast trailer where they'll find their podcast anyway, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, those sort of places. But on the off chance that maybe someone is listening to this trailer on another podcast or is maybe found it on your socials or YouTube, like I said before, then you need to make it clear that people can find your podcast wherever they find their podcasts. So say just that. You don't need to say every single place where people can find your podcast, because if you're using a platform like podcast.co and you're using that to post your podcast to all the different sites,
then there could be 8 that you need to name.
And if you have a website, then it doesn't hurt to have some links available for people just simply click on and they're found your podcast straight away. People are lazy. I say it all the time. People want as limited possible options. So maybe have a link in bio on your social media as well, and just have all those links listed straight away. People will love that. Okay, cool. So those are 6 questions that you need to ask yourself first, but now you need to write the script. So how? Why? When? Let's go through it. Our first piece of advice is to be clear and concise. Like you say, you don't get much time when you're filming a trailer, so you need to be as clear as possible and use short sentences. Don't be pretentious, don't overcomplicate things, just be yourself. You'll likely want to give people the best version of you, but listeners will want to just hear you. So be you. Number 2, keep a conversational tone. So again, be yourself. Don't suddenly become this 1920s BBC standard English presenter. You need to talk like you usually do. This is much easier if you have a co-host, because you can just have a regular chat, record that, and try not to script too much. But if it's yourself, then try and talk how you will in your podcast. Number 3, dictate scripts for a more natural flow. So if you're not a writer by trade, it can sometimes be difficult to write in a natural speaking way. Rather than spending hours and hours drafting up different scripts, you might find it easier to just dictate. What we mean by this is just have a conversation with a friend, or just speak some points out loud and record yourself doing it. There's loads of different software now that can turn speech into text really quickly, and a lot of it's free. This text can then be edited, tidied up a bit, and then used for your script. This should give you a more natural flow to your script, rather posts, but it doesn't sound real a lot of the time. People will know when you've done it. Trust me. Number 4, use delivery notes. These are essentially little points and notes in your script that give you ways you should probably deliver certain lines. So for example, if you're saying a joke, then you want to be quite cheery. But if you want to make a big statement or point, then maybe you want to start talking a bit slower. It's also a good idea to make these after you recorded your first draft. Listen to it back and hear how it sounds. Does it sound like maybe you should have paused at a certain section, or does it sound like maybe you spoke too quickly? Make these notes on your original script and then record again. Doing this will add life into your script. It will make it sound more natural and probably give you a lot more confidence when you're speaking. Number 5, don't cram it with sound design. So it's absolutely true that music, jingles, sound effects, all that jazz is brilliant. And they're powerful tools for setting the tone of your podcast. But don't overdo it. We don't need air horns every 5 seconds. Sound design should serve to enhance your podcast trailer, not overpower it. Keep it subtle, relevant, and allow it to complement your narration rather than just... Number 6, run it through before recording. So this sort of goes without saying, do some practice. Pretty much all podcast trailers aren't done live, fortunately, so you are able to practice, you're able to do lots and lots of takes until you get it right. Don't just record it once, go, yeah, that'll do, and then throw it up. Record it, listen to it, do it again, record it again, listen to it again, do it again, repeat. Send it to friends, family, people that don't like you on Twitter, and see what they think. You need a mixture of both positive and negative feedback to know if it's good or not. At the end of the day, people listening to it are complete strangers. They're not going to know your certain characteristics yet. So there might be sections where you use sarcasm and it doesn't necessarily come across as sarcasm. By saying it to random people or acquaintances rather than your family, those people are probably more likely to pick it up. This way, you're solving problems that can be easily avoided. Okay, great stuff. Good. I'm going to take all of that on board, Rowan. Brilliant. Don't suppose you just have a template I could use, do you? Yes, I do. But I'm not happy about it. No, I am happy about it. Why not? If we have a template, why not use it? So yeah, this is a template you can see over on our blog, but I'll read it out to you now. Let me know how it sounds. Welcome to the Frog Podcast, where we delve into frogs and uncover interesting things about frogs. I'm your host, Frog and Frolsh. And I'm here because I'm an expert in all things frogs. In this daily podcast, we'll journey into the world of frogs, meeting frogs and tackling frogs. If you love frogs, then the Frog Podcast is the show for you. Here we'll share all the different types of frogs you could possibly frog, tailored to frog fans like you. You can listen to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever else you might get your podcasts. Okay, so obviously, take out the frogs, but you get the gist. Think of how you could take elements from these and use them in your own trailer. Number 1, On the Rails by West Midlands Trains.
Welcome to On the Rails, the go-to place for your train and transport fix. I'm your host Liam from West Midlands Trains, and I'm here to bring you a ton of helpful facts, entertainment, and even some relaxing mindfulness techniques to help get you through your day. In this podcast, we'll be delving into a series of rail-related issues, from navigating the strikes to timing your ticket purchases perfectly. We'll also have some delightful conversations with everyone in the West Midlands Trains family. From our longest-serving staff to our newest recruits and apprentices, all on hand to give you everything you need. It really is a necessity for all of you regular railway users. You can listen to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you get your audio fix. On the Rails is brought to you by West Midlands Trains.
So what's so good about this one? Well, the included information gives the listener a good understanding of the podcast. The host, Liam, is introduced. Target audience is identified, obviously regular railway users. It states what value the listeners will get from it, such as travel facts, money-saving tips, etc. And it lists exactly where listeners can find the show. Number 2, The Healthy Practice by Write-Up.
Does that buzz sound familiar? We all know that things can get a little hectic when running a practice, and this is where we come in. I'm Ellie McDonald, your host of The Healthy Practice, the show designed to help practitioners and medical professionals really get a grip on their work and life. If you're listening to this, you're probably at the start of your career or in the depths of establishing and running your own practice. So how can we help you navigate these common problems?
I think there are actually 2 dimensions to health. One is passive and the other is active.
Thankfully, algorithms are moving in that direction too now. It's less about just churning it out and churning it out.
Your business grows and you haven't got the systems and processes in place to deal with it.
We'll cover everything from marketing your practice to getting the perfect work-life balance and everything in between. Listen and subscribe for all that and more, wherever you get your podcasts.
little bit of a shorter one, that one, but still gives you exactly what you need to know. The description provides good context about the podcast backstory. The host, Ellie, is introduced. The ideal listener is identified, obviously people running or starting a practice. Tells you what listeners can expect from the show. And again, tells the listener exactly where they can find the podcast. Number 3, Pause to Talk by Dogs for Good.
Hello there, it's Lorraine Kelly here, and when I'm not talking on the telly or out walking with my dog Angus, I'm usually tucked up listening in on my favourite podcasts. And that's why I'm hosting the brand new show, Pause to Talk. I've teamed up with pet insurer More Than and charity Dogs for Good to bring you this podcast, sharing the inspiring stories of those with assistance dogs and how their four-legged friends have helped them build their confidence and tackle feelings of loneliness. So, please subscribe to Pause to Talk on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favourite podcast app.
Again, a very quick trailer, but I think you'll agree it does the job nicely. The opening format speaks directly to the reader and builds rapport. Lorraine Kelly, the host, is obviously introduced. Upbeat music and dog sound effects set the tone of the show nicely. The premise of the show sounds pretty appealing, and all production partners and big names that people might recognize are stated. Now, please don't just go ahead and copy these trailers. Obviously, that's not going to work for you, but I'm sure there's elements here you could definitely take and utilize. So that's about it. First impressions matter, especially in the podcast market in 2024 when, like I say, there are millions of podcasts. Podcast trailers aren't essential, but by creating one, you're giving your podcast the best chance to stand out in a very oversaturated market. Even if you just have a couple of hours to spend on it, do it. It'll be worth it in the long run. If you already have a podcast and maybe it's not doing very well, maybe you've got a few episodes up already, a podcast trailer could be a great way to reignite it. Have you got a podcast trailer that you'd like to share with the class? Well, let us know down in the comments. And if you have any great ideas other people might use, then let us know that too. But until next time, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.